everyone. Welcome to the Chain Mountain Podcast. I'm your host, Hank Ackerman. And in today's episode, I spoke with Mike Klimavicius, the CPO of Scientific Games. Scientific Games is a global leader in lottery and gaming technology. So think instant games, sports betting platforms, and digital solutions that execute that lottery securely. In this episode, we had a terrific conversation covering a wide variety of topics, including the booming business of lottery games, private equity's foundation for success, are tariffs here to stay, today's victim mentality, storytelling for success, and will college remain the norm? And probably most importantly, how aliens might interpret Mike's calendar. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on all of our awesome future guests. Enjoy. All right, Mike, welcome to the podcast. I'm going to start off with a number, 50%. And this is approximately the percentage of Americans who purchased a lottery ticket within the last year. It's a staggering number, right? And I just got back from dropping my son off in Colorado at college, and I made a mental note that every gas station I stopped at, which was many on the way back, to see, was there lottery at this location? And every single one had probably anywhere between 50 to 100 games that you could play, even in the middle of nowhere, like, Hayes, Nebraska, right? Or Hayes, Kansas, I should say. Talk a little bit about it, what your take is on why it's so popular. And then I'd love to kind of get a little bit of give the listeners an understanding of the business and the industry so they can kind of get an appreciation of the size and the growth that it's undergoing.
Yeah, no, and by the way, thanks for having me, Hank. I really appreciate the opportunity here. But yeah, 50% of Americans, it's quite an amazing stat, considering that not even all states have lottery, right? So you look at, there's 5 states in particular that don't have lottery for the right reasons. Think of Nevada being one of them, and how that would maybe compete with what's going on in the state on the gaming side. But it is amazing. And, for me, probably the most amazing number is the revenue that it takes in. It's a greater than $100 billion industry in just the U.S. alone.
Wow.
Just in the U.S. alone. And, you think about where that money goes and the funding behind that. And it's crazy to think that, my daughter is going on a scholarship to a state school in Georgia on lottery winning or on lottery revenue, right? And
Wow.
the one thing that it's really great about even being involved in the lottery is that you have to remind yourself, like I guess like working in a medical industry, you're developing products, you're manufacturing products that save people's lives, and then you go to a gaming industry or a lottery industry, and you try to have that same tie. And you think initially it's like, I just can't have that pride factor, right? But then you go and you understand that if you look at the $100+ billion, and 80% of that goes back to funding schools and libraries and senior centers, it's the feel good that you need to really, springboard yourself into doing a great job. So lottery's fantastic. It's simple. People enjoy it. They don't have to do much to play it. The chances they're going to win something small to something large is quite good. So it's a fascinating industry.
Yeah. So it's quite a niche industry. How did you end up getting into it? I mean, what was your path there?
Yeah. So the path for me happened to be simply out of location convenience, if you will. I was definitely looking for my next challenge in my career, and there happened to be the CPO role over at the company I'm at, Scientific Games, and I hit it off with who my manager is now, our CFO, right on day one. It was a really great fit.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's hard to find sometimes, right? Is that are you the right fit with your manager and vice versa, right?
That's
so
right.
that you can really be a good team member. So you're a CPO, right? Chief Procurement Officer, for those unfamiliar with that. What are the levers that you pull to be successful, right? So in this industry, people probably wondering, well, what do you buy, right? Where are your expenses? and how do you create value?
Yeah. So it's a very it's a simple question you've asked. It's a very deep answer, and I'll do my best to not go too deep. But it starts with people. Honestly, it's
Yeah.
all about leadership, and it's about developing the best talent. Because simply could I create cost models? Could I? Of course, right? But that's not what we really need to be successful. We need the team to be successful. So for me, it starts with the team and making sure that we have an engaged team, and that looks. And that again, simple said, but very hard to implement. Takes a lot of work and a lot of good um, observations, a lot of good listening. So just being there for the team, being a good leader. But the levers that you pull simply have to go back to the fundamentals of strategic sourcing and procure to pay cycles, and all the fundamentals that, if they're done correctly, positions the company to be successful, to be competitive. Um, our number one spend in raw materials is in paper, obviously, right? We have a lot of scratch off tickets. In fact, that's an interesting question for you, Hank. Is if you think about how many tickets are produced just for the U.S., what number would you think? Just scratch off cards.
Scratch off cards, boy. I'm trying to do some quick math in my head, and I can't even begin to think about how many gas stations and how many scratch off cards I saw per gas station. Um, but I'm going to have to think that it's probably in the hundreds of millions, maybe
Yeah.
billions.
Yeah, we produce alone, and we're not the only manufacturer, right? We
Right.
produce alone 50 billion tickets a year.
Wow.
50 billion, right? So just think of that, and the number one raw material being paperboard for
Right.
that, and
Right.
inks, and all the different
Yeah.
security features that have to go along with it.
Yeah.
It's what levers do you pull? It's obviously the fundamentals around index-based pricing agreements, and how do you hold your suppliers accountable via cost models, and there's a lot of science behind making us as competitive as we can be. Um, so the levers you pull are really the same ones you pull if you're buying indirect services or you know um, electronics
Right.
from overseas. They really don't change. The fundamentals are the same. It's just how do you build that storyline to get the result that you're after.
Yeah. So, those of us who are in supply chain kind of know, the balance of customer service level, operational efficiency, i.e. cost and inventory. Where on that, triangle do you find yourself kind of leaning, right? So what are the most important things in your business? Is it your more costs, right? Or you want to optimize your inventory, or you want to have a higher service level, and it's more important to make sure that the product is available versus cost per se.
Can I answer with yes to all of them? I mean, it really is.
Every CEO says yes. I want them all.
Yeah, I'm on my path to the CEO. It sounds like that's fantastic.
That's right.
Oh gosh, no, listen, if you don't have your cost structure where it needs to be, you're simply not going to be competitive. You're not going to win the bids that if you in our industry, if you have an opportunity to win a bid and you don't get to see that bid again for 7, 10, 12 years. They're
Wow.
long-term contracts with our state level customers. And so you miss, you're out. So we have to be, you know, hyper focused on where we're sitting from a cost position. But then the company has to operate successfully, right? And so when you look to working capital, when you look to inventory and your balance sheet, and those have to be right sized, and you have to ensure a level of nimbleness. In our industry, it's even more so. You think about a state that all of a sudden either needs a boost of revenue and they want to get it through a new game, or they have a little extra money and they want to push the envelope a little bit, right? We have to be reactive enough to produce that game in a very secure way, a very safe way, and get it to its point of use, which, as you said in Kansas, was hundreds of different convenience stores, right? Think of the logistics around how do
Mm,
we deploy those games to where they all hit the shelves on the same day, the
yeah.
timing impacts. It's a customer experience, and really, if your customers aren't satisfied with your product, they're simply not going to buy it. They're going to
Yeah.
buy a Coke or a Slim Jim and not a scratch off card, right? So it's really I hate to answer it with all three, but yeah, we're there.
So you brought up an interesting kind of comment I want to segue on is around, working capital, and a lot of corporations and larger corporations, they're not so focused and they don't care as much. Private equity is a little bit different, right? They've taken out a big loan to buy the company,
Right.
oftentimes, and they may not have paid that all back. And so you've got, covenants as well as payments that are due. And so working capital, I find, is more precious in the kind of private equity owned world. I mean, we both operated in it. What have you learned that is required to be successful in that environment, right? What have you learned that's different maybe about your experiences in other business environments,
Yeah.
ownership models?
I actually appreciate private equity because it really now has established a new foundation for myself, right? When you think about the needs of a private equity firm and the often 3 to 5 year time horizon on making it better, selling it, extracting value, and moving on to the next one, right? You have to understand that again, the hyper focus is on execution, it's on speed, it's on adding value, right? And what I mean about a new foundation for myself is you can now, once you understand that, it works in every business. It may not be the most comfortable in every business, right? Because
Hmm.
it's, you're sometimes fighting culture, but at the same time, if you're able to deliver results and deliver them quickly, it's actually, if you think about young people in our industry, it's a good lesson for them. Even it's if you are able to kind of build that, have that knife edge early in your career, um, boy, are you going to go far. It's
Yeah.
really important. And I would say even to the point where if you're not doing it, it's quickly a reason to get noticed in a negative light, and
Yeah.
so that you're a procrastinator or it's really got to be driving fast at results.
Yeah. Yeah. So level of urgency, right? And some grit to throw in there, right?
Yeah.
Ability to kind of get knocked down, dust yourself off, and get back at it, right?
And think of that, you can't do it with any recklessness though, right? So I mean, when
Right.
you have
Right.
your non-negotiables around safety or quality or compliance, you can't sacrifice those just to get a result. So it's that balance. It's that balance that really helps again catapult us into the direction that they want us to go, and quickly as we can get there.
So, I broadly lump kind of personal advancements into two alternating phases, right? Phases of learning a craft and then phases of honing a craft. Um, in your, perhaps recent experience, but in your experience, right? Are there particular periods that stand out, for you, and that you can advise a young person and say, yeah, this is a period to learn a craft, and then this is a period to hone it. And, oftentimes I feel like there's a stigma perhaps with, our younger generations that, they've learned something and then all of a sudden they're experts and now they want the next thing, right?
Right.
So, and talk
Right.
about that for a second, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, so procurement's an interesting field because you can't really go to school for procurement, right? I
Yeah.
think now it's becoming a little bit more mainstream with having supply chain programs in college, or even secondary schools. But when I was going through the ranks, I'm a double degreed mechanical engineer, and I started in product design and kind of moved my way up. There was really nowhere to go to learn about what good procurement looks like. And so for me it was exposure. It was projects, it was inquisitiveness, right? Just learning and being almost a self-learner and finding ways to make an impact, right? Um, and when you do that, you get noticed. And I think, people like to surround themselves with people that deliver results and they're really, you know, good career advisors in their own way. And I did that. I personally reached out to peers in the new field that I hadn't worked in before, and I understood really what good looked like, or at least from their standpoint. And it's worked well for me, I would tell you, because once you build the muscle of being results focused, the sky's the limit. That's what CEOs want. That's what business unit
Right.
leaders want. They want results at the end of the day. And so if I'm to give young people in our industry some advice, it's earn your seat at the table. Find a way to be present for one. I mean, with the hybrid model these days, that's not so easy,
Yeah.
but you can
Yeah.
be present if you really are intentional about it. You can be at the office, you can be at the right calls and the right on-site meetings. You got to know your data. So if someone
Yeah.
asks you, what is our spend in this, or what is the lead time for that, you've got to know. Yeah, it's great to say, I don't know, I'll get back to you, but it's much
Yeah.
more powerful to just give them the answer right there in the moment.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and then delivering those results is really to me what separates good from bad at the end of the day. Those that can, they
Yeah.
get it. Those that can't, they're overlooked.
Yeah.
Um, I have a funny story. So I was actually having ice cream with my family over the weekend, and we were just talking about kind of the next generation of workers and some of the tendencies they have about not really engaging all the time, not being the one starting conversations. And as we're talking about this, there was a small family across the table from us where this young lady, 13, 14 years old, she was just asking questions. She was interested. She listened really intently to it was her grandmother maybe, or her mom or her grandmother. And honestly, it was so nice and refreshing to watch. I want to learn more about that girl now, right? So if I can give any advice, it's engage in conversation. Be a self-starter.
Right.
Go talk to whoever it is. Just because they're the CEO doesn't mean their pants go on differently. They're approachable. They want to talk to you just as much as anybody does, right? So to me, that's a differentiator these days.
Yeah. 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 So two takeaways there I got was kind of certainly command of the numbers is what I had an old managing director tell me. You got to have command of the numbers, be able to understand what's behind them, et cetera, especially in the environment when you're talking to your senior executives, right? And then curiosity, right? Ability
Yeah,
to ask questions and learn. And I think to your point that there's no school for procurement, right? Maybe there is now that you're able to take classes, but
yeah,
you have to have some level of curiosity and be able to ask questions and learn and feel like you don't know everything, right?
yeah, yeah.
What other kind of leadership tools and skills do you recommend a CPO knowing? If you kind of pull back on it on my day to day, what do I use on a day to day basis that I think are really important skills for you to learn?
Yeah, I mean, it goes along with knowing your numbers, right? And I would say procurement is a very big numbers focused profession. So, understanding how you can analyze the data. And maybe this is a bit of my engineering background coming into play here, but, you know, knowing when to use a Pareto chart versus a pie chart, just being able to build your storyline.
Yeah.
Storytelling is huge. If you can build up your numbers and know what story your numbers are telling, it's really powerful. And
Right.
it's those that do it well that typically get the funding, typically
Yeah.
get the teammates, whatever it is you're asking for. If you're a good storyteller, the answer is very rarely a no,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
That's a great point. The fact that there's a misconception in my mind. Often people are talking about an ROI on something, and if it has a certain ROI, it's fine. But in reality, in corporate world, capital is competitive, right?
Yeah,
You've got to beat out all the rest of the other potential projects out there. So you have to tell a good story. And I think that, part of telling a good story is a couple things. You got to get to the so what. I have had great mentors in my life who have been very good about asking that so what, so what, so what, right? You throw some data out there, in the old gold rat model, data is useless unless
yeah,
it's turned into information, right? So how
right.
do I turn that data into information that I can use to make a decision? And that's really, really important to be able to kind of communicate at that executive level, and tell that story that you're trying to do. The other one was really interesting is, when you're presenting a slide or a piece of information to an executive, right? Typically, they only have the capacity to be able to really take away one, maybe two facts for it, right?
Yeah.
Off of that thing, right? So it's really got to pop. I think the one piece of coaching I provide on a very regular basis is you've got all this information on a slide, so what are the really important things that I need to take away from it? Because most executives aren't really going to be able to absorb what you're trying to tell them, right?
No, you're absolutely right. I can remember very recently it was kind of an interesting moment for me in my career, but it was very recently as I was in downtown New York at Penn One Plaza, 30th floor with the Empire State Building in the background, and presenting a cost model to an executive that hadn't clearly seen a cost model before. And, I just remembered being there, and it was in my head, it was be brief, be bright, and be gone, right? It was those three
Yeah.
things that I had to get in there, and I had to explain something that this gentleman has never seen before. I had to explain why it was important and what we expect as an outcome of that. And I had to do it within 3 to 5 minutes. So, you're absolutely right. Know your audience, know what you're there to do it, and get out of there, right?
Sometimes we learn as much from our mistakes as we do. I mean, any stories from your past on what not to do? Maybe not you particularly, but what you've observed in other
Yeah.
people?
No, great question. I think you learn most when you fail, right? And
Yeah.
as long as you provide an environment where failure is okay, it's safe. That's the beginning of a growth organization. That's when you can really learn. But
Yeah.
two things that I would say probably come to mind would be emotion. If you're gonna get emotional, you've immediately lost whatever leverage, whatever result you were after. There's many occurrences in my past where somebody had to kind of back me down from a conversation and say, okay, hey, let's take a pause. It's going in the wrong direction. And boy, did I appreciate that, because no doubt we were losing because I was getting really upset. I was getting frustrated. I was getting
Yeah.
mad. So emotion has no place at work. Don't take business personal is one of my sayings, and it's just emotional intelligence, understanding what you can and can't do and say. And the second that comes to mind is a little bit of victim mentality, right?
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
learned that it's so much more in terms of relationship building when you start to point the finger first at yourself rather than trying to blame someone or something else for what just happened. And when you start to be able to do that routinely, you kind of moves to my real the basis of my belief is that I want to be better tomorrow than I was today. And if you're pointing at other people, you're not understanding how you could have influenced that situation to get a more positive outcome, right? So
Right.
get rid of the emotion, don't play the victim.
Yeah.
That's my advice.
Those are really great points. Yeah, really, really good. Um, as a younger generation, right, technology is always an important part of what separates our understanding of the world versus a lot of the more senior executives that we learn from. How are you guys using technology? I mean, tell me what you can, right? I know
Yeah.
there's probably some stuff that you can't tell me about, but tell me a little bit about how you're using technology, to get ahead, and what things you're observing out there, that are real, and then maybe some areas where there's false promise, right? You just haven't
Yeah.
seen it be mature yet.
Yeah. I mean, I would say first and foremost, and I know what the logical answer to your question is, and we'll probably get to that, I imagine. But first and foremost, in procurement, again, along the lines of knowing your numbers, there's a expectation that we are routinely looking at our numbers to the point where we're obsessed with them, and you've got to have it's just mandatory. You have to have some level of spend analytics tool that you're using you got your spend cube and your taxonomy, and you're looking at your categorized suppliers, and you can pull out how many suppliers are in a given category and make decisions around how many should there be, right? And really, but
Right.
using the technology to do that, whereas in the past it was Excel spreadsheets and things along those lines, now you have tools that are almost telling you those answers just with the data it's fed. And it makes us much more efficient. We can come to decisions in a much quicker way. We can action those decisions and go get those results, right? So think about spend analytics, working capital analytics around how your suppliers are being paid. Are they being paid according to your agreements? What are your agreements? Are your agreements,
Yeah.
how is that tying in? And technology these days bridges that gap with what I just said. You've got to
Right.
wrap your arms around it, right?
Right.
But okay, let's get to it. So the reality is, when I was at the Institute of Supply Management conference earlier this year in June, they have 3 days worth of sessions, and each session is maybe an hour long, and they go from 8 in the morning till 6 at night. And there's multiple sessions each hour of different things you get to choose to go on.
Right.
And I would tell you greater than 80% had the term AI somewhere in there, right?
Right. Right.
And it has just completely dominated our landscape, and I'm sure the landscape of other industries and professions as well. But from a lottery point of view, the one thing we have to be ultra careful about is data sensitivity, data security, and making sure that we have the right firewalls in place that doesn't allow the information to get out.
Right.
When you look at ChatGPT and OpenAI and understand that it's open for everybody to see. Now, they can't necessarily query specific information for scientific games, for example, but what they can do is you can generalize where cost models are for our business, where cost structures are. And so you have to be careful with that. But balancing that with the efficiency pickup, like a great example, and I'm sure many people have experienced this, but we've fed in a 120-page contract into an AI tool, and within seconds, literally seconds, it gave me the power positions for the buyer and seller and recommended actions for the buyer, which was us in the case, on how we could reposition conversations to get a better outcome for us in seconds, where this would have taken days, weeks in the past, right? So
Yeah.
how do
Yeah.
you not take advantage of that technology?
Yeah.
It's no longer a first mover advantage. I mean, now if you're not doing it, you're simply not competitive.
Yeah, yeah. Certainly contracts, right, especially with the prevalence of LLMs, has become a place where you can, certainly gain a lot of advantage. And then, to your point, the spend analytics side, right,
Yeah.
being able to query sets of data, in a much more efficient fashion and be able to, kind of extract, I hate to use the played out term, insights per se.
Right. Right.
But yeah.
I mean, think of this too, Hank. Have you ever written a performance appraisal in the past?
Yeah.
Yeah, we all have, right? And sometimes, I don't know,
Fortunately.
maybe I'm alone in this, but I
Right.
remember just stewing over how to word something to where I balanced, not making the person upset with me versus getting the feedback they wanted.
Right.
And now, I mean, it's just using some of the AI tools that we have and just giving it intent and messaging
Yeah.
constraints, what it may look like. It's so easy, and boy, does it sound polished when it's done
Yeah.
right. So it's just as in little ways like that, or writing job descriptions for roles.
Yeah.
It's just made me so much better at what I do.
Yeah. Where do you think it's inappropriate to use it? We'll use that. I'll start
Great
with that.
question. Yeah. So I mean, confidential information has to remain confidential, and understanding, you know, that there is a line there that should not be crossed, whether you're talking about, personal data of an employee, or medical records, or things that just need to remain um, sensitive and confidential. There's got to be a line there that we acknowledge. I would even say, to some extent, understanding deep financials of a business, or performance ratings of employees, like those sensitive items. I do think require the respect of not having it in those tools.
Right, right. Um, for me, one of my pet peeves is my LinkedIn feed is blowing up with, I'll call it, technical transformation vomit
Mm,
articles, right? Just
mm,
it is amazing how much just AI generated, and not to say that it's all garbage, but AI generated thinking, where sometimes just want to say, hey, well, I'd love to see your prompt, right? That generated all of the stuff that you just spewed out on your LinkedIn feed. So,
right.
yeah, I think that for me, and maybe this is just a fact that I was an English major in college,
Ah,
and I feel like there are times when it's very, very useful to help
Yeah.
with, being concise and grammar and a number of other things. But there's another component of, what makes us human and what makes us genuine, and how we think, right? And
yeah,
there's a
no,
lot of science behind the fact that you need to use your brain or like, just like working it out, right? You need to
Yeah.
use your brain on a very regular basis. And that's an important part of what, kind of keeps you intelligent and keeps you, from, having good brain health and longevity,
Mm,
right? Whereas I think there was a recent study, and I'm not going to get the statistics right, but there was I think somewhere around a 80% loss in terms of ability to articulate and remember information with students who used ChatGPT to
sure.
generate all of their writing versus students who were forced to write the article themselves, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So the numbers are pretty staggering, right? And
Yeah.
I think there's a time and a place, but there'll be a long-term impact.
Yeah, the one thing I probably it resonates the most with me is even talking to my youngest son who just finished high school is, now that he's got his diploma and he's happy with that, the question of how much did you use that? How much did you lean on that, rely on that? And it was scary, the answer I heard. Scary, right? So
Right,
so
right,
you're absolutely right. I mean, if you don't go to school to get a grade, you go to school to learn. And if we're using the wrong behaviors and the wrong tools in that area, we're to try to zoom out now, we're developing a workforce of the future that is not ready. They're not prepared for what it is they're going to have to face. It's scary, right? It's
right,
scary.
right.
But
Uh,
yeah,
so so you got a new project, right?
I
Maybe tell
do.
us a little bit about what you're doing and what your goals and intents are with your new project.
I do. Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, I just started a consulting firm called Apex Procurement Advisors, and it was really born out of I have a friend that owns a few restaurants in the Chicagoland area, pizzerias, and he had been asking me for quite some time to help him source lower cost consumables, napkins
Right,
and that stuff. And it came to the point where um, it became more than that. It became, oh, well, now let's look at furniture. Let's look at different things that I don't want to buy on Amazon, or I don't want to go to the local store and get because it's really expensive. And yeah, I don't mind buying a container of it from overseas. And he doesn't know where to begin with that.
right,
And that then paralleled over to other similar struggling companies where they could take advantage of what it is we do and what we know to help them with their bottom line. And honestly, it started from that, and it's starting to grow into something that is going to be much bigger in my mind. Because what we talked about today, even in this podcast, about having the understanding of what a cost model looks like, or how to do spend analytics the right way, or working capital expectations for private equity and public companies. Um, there's a lot of opportunity there to make even micro changes that has a massive impact to a bottom line of a company. And so our target is going to be really the small to mid tier firms, the 50 million to 5 billion in revenue firms that we can really go in and do a few things. We could do the fundamentals. We can help with, doing the analytics and providing an opportunity list of where their team can go next. We could provide upskilling opportunities for the current procurement team in place. We're even offering fractional CPO type leadership opportunities for firms that want to get a good head start or hit the ground running with process and procedure that's going to take them on their journey where they want to go, and then turn that over to a team and let them drive it from there. So a lot of different options, but really excited about the chance to kind of go independent and look at where this will take us. So it's exciting.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we're starting some new traditions. I wanted to do a section on kind of predictions of the future, right? Give me a couple predictions. What you think? Open-ended. What do you think is going to be out there, and then you'll have the opportunity in a few years to come back and check to see how accurate you were, right?
Yeah. How out there can I get with this? How
As far as you want.
far as I want?
Outer space, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Well, let's. I'll give two examples, and one will be I think appropriate for where we're at this day and age, and then another one I think is going to be a little bit controversial, but let's see how that one goes.
Okay, yeah.
First one, I think in supply chain, in procurement, you can't ignore what's going on in geopolitical scheme right now, and the tariffs that are in place, and how it's if anything, disruption's probably the word to use here, because we simply don't know how to pivot. One day it's this level, the next day it's that level, and how do you really balance that, and how do you take the right decisions for today? So for me, these aren't going to go away. The value that it's going to, the value tariffs are going to bring to this country that are going to then fund really important things, not just government, but a lot of great projects. People will get normalized to the fact of new prices for everything. And it's just going to be, it's hot now. It's a hot topic now. People are really upset about it. That emotion wears away. And I do think they're here to stay. So what does that mean? That means really, my forecast for this is that we have to involve nearshoring. We have to look at friendshoring. Those are terms that are coming up. But really, what does that mean? That means taking production from overseas and bringing it back close to home. Right? Whether we're leveraging a USMCA trade agreement and doing something in Mexico, we have to have supply options that we can pivot to that makes us competitive no matter what the landscape of tariffs look like. It's a lot of work. Engineers are going to be stressed, test engineers, setting up new suppliers, that we've never dealt with before, new cultures that you have to deal with. Dealing in Mexico is quite different than dealing in China, for example, right?
Yeah.
And understanding that is really important to being successful quick. But that's logical. I think that's that's logical that people are starting to think along those lines and just have staying power there. So my forecast is moving in the direction of more nearshoring, friendshoring, and anything along those lines. The second one, I think this is the controversial one, I think, and it's a little bit of what we just talked about. I really think the romance with the university education, it's going to become a lot less normalized. I think we're starting to see, if you will, the fall of the expectation that everybody leaving high school is destined to go to college at some point in time.
Right.
My son just recently decided he's not going to go to college. He just graduated. He just started this week in HVAC school. Right. He wants to learn how to, to implement and fix heating and HVAC systems. And I think that's fantastic. I honestly think when you look at where AI is probably going to take a lot of roles in this world, and eliminate, I've got roles on my team that I'm already asking the question. You think of the traditional buyer. It's a
Right.
check the box. It's a very important role. Make no mistake, it's a very important role. But their job is to do pretty much the same thing on this purchase order, from step one to step 10. And at some point, you got to acknowledge the fact that there's probably going to be software tools taking that over. So when you combine that with how many kids are exiting the universities and how difficult it's going to be to find a job, it's going to be ultra competitive to the point where it's going to push people away from that and into more of the blue collar where people are using their hands and not their minds sometimes. And that's okay. We have to stop the normalization of the only positive path for a young individual is through college. It
Yeah.
has to
Yeah.
stop.
That's been I mean, I've heard a lot of kind of comparisons, and if you've been overseas and traveled around Europe, and there's a lot of more trade schools, right, that are, and there's a much more rigorous path towards apprenticeships and the trades than there is in the U.S., right? And I think that's still a gap in our system. And I agree. I mean, I'm sending my kid to college. And what I've advised him is to say, hey, work on things that are going to be, either, changing materials or moving materials, right?
Yeah,
Because those are things that AI is not going to be able to take away, right?
exactly.
And he's interested in biochemistry, and that world's going to change a lot, right? The pace of innovations could definitely going to change. But from a trade perspective, right? I think the fact that we've kind of stigmatized and also in a way kind of put on a pedestal the white collar experience in the U.S. Has I put disadvantaged a lot of our population in terms of what we find as an acceptable career and what you can do as a human
Yeah,
to provide for your family and live a good life. But you've got to understand there's plenty of great little HVAC companies out there that where a person who was good and they were business minded grew it up, and they've got a great path to success. So
no doubt.
and they're pretty profitable jobs. I remember I mentored a young man in high school, and the numbers coming out of HVAC school were pretty impressive for that young man. Certainly a lot better than the other options that he had. But
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever had or how recently you had like a service person have to come to your house. We had a plumber come in to fix a leaky faucet, leaky like a spout on the bathtub, and it cost me almost $500 to have him do maybe an hour's worth of work.
right,
And it
right,
makes me mad as an engineer, thinking I could probably do this myself, darn it, but I didn't have the knowledge or whatnot, but they do, right? And so
yeah,
the thought of even thinking blue collar versus white collar, I guarantee you there's a lot of what we consider blue collar folks out there that are making a heck of a lot more money and having a better life than, some of the white collar folks out there these days. So, the stigma has to go away, to your point. It's definitely an opportunity for these kids to harvest. And one of the things that I found interesting is I do travel a lot. And the last time I was in China talking to a factory owner, and we were doing similar conversations around forecasting what the challenges are going to be and how do we get pricing in line, and having those normal conversations. He said, listen, my biggest fear, my biggest issue at the moment is I cannot attract the younger generation to come in my factory and turn screws. I can't do it. They want to be
right,
content. This is China, right?
yeah,
In a
yeah,
very small, not in Shanghai or Beijing, right? This is in a small town in China. He says they want to be content creators. They want to be developing software for TikTok and doing those things. They don't want to be in a factory working 12-hour days, to just get by. It's not, I use the word sexy in this case. It's not sexy for them to do that. He goes, so what do I do in 10 years when I don't have a workforce that will turn those screws? So they're
right,
investing in automation. And it's
yeah,
like, you don't go to China to take advantage of their automation, right? You take
yeah,
advantage of the lower cost labor. So the whole landscape is changing in front of us. It's
yeah.
quite interesting.
Which I think feeds a little bit into your point about having an agile supply chain and being able to move your supply base around,
That's
right? I
right.
mean, I remember there was a big movement to maybe 5 or 6 years ago to move away from that's kind of when things started to move away from China to lower cost countries, Vietnam, et cetera. And the head of Li and Feng, who I was, Victor Li, who I was able to meet, provided a great comment, right? There's not 100 million jobs in Vietnam, right? There's not 100 million people who are, able to just turn around and now do these jobs that are currently being done in China, right? So the scale of China is really is really daunting. And so, yeah, while they're having those issues, a lot of this change happens a little bit, slower than a lot of folks think. But
Yeah.
those moves do happen, right? And so being able to have the agility to move your manufacturing and look for alternative supplies, I think, to me, puts an additional emphasis on the supply chain and procurement kind of function as a critical business capability, right?
Yeah.
You made the point about the fact that there's not, or there wasn't, anywhere you could go to learn procurement, right? And I know there are schools now where you can go to college and get a supply chain degree. And that wasn't really the case back when, you and I were growing up in this profession, right? You had to learn from a mentor and you had to learn from someone else, and
Right.
which was great. But now our profession finally is kind of growing and getting more serious, and,
Yeah.
and I think that it presents a lot of opportunities for folks. One thing that's always, I said, frustrated me is that, you put out a job, right, for in the U.S. And in supply chain planner or something along those lines, right? And you'll get 200 resumes probably within 24 hours,
Right.
right? However, if you really, do your initial analysis of that 200, and this is actual, kind of statistics from a while ago when I was looking for a planner, and we had this very, very challenge. 180 of those applicants needed a green card or some visa support, right? So, domestically, things like supply chain, which in my mind is a great career, right? We're not obviously training or valuing those, and
Yeah.
that's what frustrates me, right? And you see in high school, you're learning a lot of different things, and then you go off to college, and you've got degrees and courses that you're forced to take, and yet
Exactly.
what gets you ready for the world in front of us is not provided, right? And so
Right.
that's something I think we need to change, certainly in
Absolutely.
the U.S.
And
education system.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
Apologies.
go.
Um, Absolutely. And how do we do that? That's the question. Who's going to be intentional? Who's going to take the first step to really changing that? It starts with us. The schools teach what they think is needed, right? And there's a lot of great experts out there that are helping to develop curriculum. Where does it ever merge with industry? Where can we
Right.
be consultants to? I don't live far from University of Georgia or Georgia Tech, for example. And here I am talking to you about this. Why am I not talking to those at those schools that are helping to develop the curriculum and those courses that say,
Yeah.
we need more of this. We
Yeah.
need we need focus on how to do what we talked about earlier, the data analytics, or I remember in high school everyone laughing when I took typing. Thank God my mom pushed me to be in typing 101 or whatever the typing class in high school was as a freshman, which, by the way, when I went there was 100% girls and me, right? It actually wasn't too bad. But, the point here is, thank God my mom said, you're taking typing because it's going to be an important skill that you're going to need.
Yeah.
And I can now, of course, I could type very well now as a result of that, which really has helped me in my career. But where's more of that? Where's home economics on teaching kids how to boil an egg or make spaghetti? Those are the things that we really need. Or how about budgeting, right? It's like such fundamental things that you don't even touch on in today's education that are so much needed.
Yeah. How do you navigate the financial system, right? That is so important to your success. And I remember we had, hours and hours of math and English and all these other courses. And I think
Right.
there was one course in middle school where they taught you how to balance a checkbook, and then you followed a stock for a while, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, wow, hindsight 2020, right? Where do I spend my time?
Mm.
Those are really important skills that, unfortunately you left school with, and you didn't have didn't they weren't sharp enough. And I think you can see that in our society, and the capabilities that people have and where people struggle on a day-to-day basis, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm also starting another tradition, and
Uh-oh.
I'm borrowing something from the Diary of a CEO podcast. Um, and I've asked the prior guest to leave you a question,
Ah.
right? They don't know who you are. They don't know what your background is. They don't know where you come from. This is totally out of nowhere, right? So I'm going to ask it to you, and then I'm going to ask you to leave a question for our next guest,
Okay.
right? Okay. Okay. So hold on. Let me pull it up here. All right. Michael, open your calendar from last week. What would aliens infer humans value most from your schedule?
Okay, you're gonna make me do it. I'm gonna put up. Remind me again. What would aliens?
Infer that you value most from looking at your schedule. So pretend
Okay.
there's number one. You got to. This is a willing suspension of disbelief, right? Alien comes down to Earth, and the first thing they're
Yeah.
going to look at is Mike Klimavicius' schedule, and he pops it open and he says, "What are humans? What's important to humans, right? I can understand that by looking at where you spend your time, right? What is that?
Yeah. Well, it's nice that I use the Outlook feature. I don't know if you do this, where you categorize your meetings, so it color codes them.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
tend to know then just looking at it from a zoomed out view. I spend a lot of time in one-on-ones, right? So I spend a lot of time
Okay.
connecting with my teammates, my peers, some leaders, even some suppliers. That as we're doing different things. So for me, it dominates with connecting individually with different people. So
Wow,
I think that's
yeah. I think that's surprisingly accurate and a healthy answer in my book, right? I think that's
yeah.
wonderful, right? If you had a different answer, readouts to my executive team, oh, that might
Oh yeah, I'm not a
that's
big
a little
fan
bit
of
different.
the report outs. I don't know. I don't feel like there's a lot of value being out of that. But no, I think it's actually good for me to hear that because I would hope that that would be front and center as a person in my role trying to influence outcomes is connecting with people and making sure that they're getting the support they need and all that. So no, I'm actually quite proud of myself for having that answer and just coming to me in that view. So thanks for the opportunity on
Very
that.
good.
And I don't know who the last person was, but what an interesting question.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're going to stop recording, and then I'm going to give you the opportunity to lay one for the next person.
Sounds good.
But Michael, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Hank. Had a great time and look forward to seeing future ones from you.
Thank you.